Hi there, my name's Chris. Welcome to beautiful Brantford, Ontario. Today we're going to be talking about this really cool Bluetooth speaker. And one thing that makes this unique is that it comes in a really nice case, the 2024 Toyota Tacoma. So the 2024 Tacoma, brand new for this year. Tacoma's been around for many, many years. This represents the latest generation. The last one was around 2016, and it's become the most popular mid-size truck in North America. So Toyota had to get this right. We couldn't mess this up. So, and I think you can agree by the styling, they've sort of done a really nice job on this vehicle. We got the hood scoop that you'll see on most Tacomas that you're going to see on the road in the last, I'd say since 2004. It's non-functional, by the way, but the sport version, which is what this is, has that on there. One of the big changes on this truck, traditionally the Tacoma, and since 2004, has been a V6. We started off with a 4-liter back then, and then we went to a 3.5 in 2016. This now is a 2.4-liter 4-cylinder turbo. And you're thinking, wow, that's going backwards a little bit. But no, this is way more efficient. We got much more torque, and the fuel economy is a good improvement as well. So the drivability is there, which makes this kind of a nice little treat. This particular truck, just as an aside, happens to be a manual transmission, which in this day and age, not too many people looking for that anymore. But in the Tacoma world, in the off-road truck world, you still have those diehards that find a manual a thing of beauty. And that's what we have in this truck. So looking at the front end, the one thing you'll see this giant air dam, and that's there for fuel economy. It does make a difference. It's a little difference. Toyota's pretty quick to say you can remove that with about 9 bolts. So if it really bothers you because you don't like the look, it'll come off. Especially if you're gonna go off-road, that might get in the way a little bit too. So under the hood here, we have the 2.4-liter turbo 4-cylinder engine. One thing Toyota doesn't do is put a new truck and a new engine on the market at the same time. So this has been tried and true in a number of different other models. The most recent one would be the Highlander of last year, and it works very well. We've had in some Lexus models. And then you look under here and you say, hey, that doesn't look so fancy anymore. Well, there's a lot of wires and things. When it gets right down to it, we're not popping the hood too much anymore. And really that big fancy cover you'd see with the chrome Toyota emblem, that was just there for show. If you'd pop that thing off, this is what you'd see. So again, in the spirit of weight savings, things like that, they sort of did away with that. It is a very quiet truck. I'll attest to that. Mind you, with the manual transmission, apparently those folks like to hear the engine when they're shifting. So I think they've done away with some of the sound deadening on this one for that reason. And there's some other features inside that we'll talk about that negate sound as well, that the manual does not have. But a very efficient engine, lots of low-end torque, so the drivability is there. Great for towing. So these engines will pull up to 6,400 pounds out of that little 4-cylinder. And I haven't tried it yet myself. More to come on that because I'm actually going to buy one of these, and we can do a future video on that. The first thing you think of when you look at the side, this is distinctly a Tacoma. And again, being the best-selling mid-size truck in North America, Toyota didn't want to mess with that. But if anything, they've made it more aggressive looking. Right from the fender flares, you got your wheels that are outbound a little more, giving it a more aggressive stance. But from this angle, I don't know if you can see it, but the frame has changed a little bit. Before we had what was called an open C-channel for much of the frame. It was boxed in the front. It was a closed C-channel in the middle and an open C-channel in the back. It created all this flexibility for putting loads in. Well, they've done away with that now. Now we're into an architecture that's actually been carried over from the Tundra, and it's on the new Land Cruiser. It'll be on the new 4Runner. It's a fully boxed frame front to back. So one of the downsides to a fully boxed frame is that things get a little rigid. So when you're hitting the bumps, you might feel a little vibration, stuff like that. So that means they got to compensate somewhere else. So the other thing to look at, and again, it might be a little hard to see from this angle, this truck no longer has leaf springs. They've gone to coils. just like again on the Tundra. So the Tundra's been out since 2022. I happen to own one, and I can attest that the ride is very good. And now they've done the same thing with Tacoma. So a little more technology going on there. Done away with that old school leaf spring business, and we're into a ride that handles more like a car. Still a truck, believe me, it's still a truck, but it's got more car-like attributes that way as far as handling and whatnot. So now we wandered around to the back end here, and again, a lot of similarities between the previous generation. Tailgate, for instance, it's dampened. There will be versions of this truck where you hit a button on the side here and the tailgate will go down, and then you hit a button on the other side, and I may have this backwards, will go back up again. While we got this open, this is something that started in 2004 on that generation Tacoma. Before that, Tacomas were much smaller. They had a steel bed. This is a fiber reinforced composite and a fancy plastic, if you will. And I think the only time I've seen one of these beds actually get punctured was when it was in a major accident in the last, 20 years. So they stand up. It stands up so well that they've actually put it in the full-size Tundra as well. Again, I have one. I can attest to how well it holds up. But the reason for that is it's never going to rust. It's not going to dent. It's a little slippery sometimes, so there is a rubber mat you can buy from Toyota that'll fit right in there. But the neat thing is we've got a lot of things that are built in. And again, this is stuff that is not new, but it's kind of unique to the Toyota Tacoma product. You got all these little built-ins here. You can put in a piece of wood across there. So keep in mind, between the fender wells, it's not quite 4 feet. So if you got a 4x8 sheet of something, it's not going to fit in there. So if you take some 2x6s, put them across, it'll sit nicely on top. You got some room underneath, but very durable. Lots of tie down points. You have these cleats here, and that allows you lots of tie downs. And the tailgate still removes if you really want to take it off for some reason. I'm going to talk about something that's kind of cool as far as aerodynamics go. So this kind of started with the Tundra. The Tundra's always had a big back window that rolled down. Tacoma does not. It's got this little tiny window. But because Tundra had that large window, if you had some debris in the bed of your pickup and you're driving down the highway and you have that window down, this sort of vortex of air would create and suck all that stuff into your cab. Kind of unpleasant. So what they did with Tundra is they designed the roof to avoid that. So you see sort of a little divot there, one on the other side. This channels the air, and this is pretty cool. And then we got this little spoiler. And what is happening is that air comes across, hits that, and goes up. So the air never goes in the bed to circle around. It's a lot of aerodynamics in play here. So they started out with Tundra. Again, works really well. I got that big back window on my truck. I've never had debris get sucked in. So they've done the same thing with Tacoma now, and that's why you have this kind of unique styling on there. Again, we got a hitch right from the factory. Every Canadian one's going to come with a hitch. Again, they'll tow about 6,400 pounds. The 7-pin wiring harness built in, and your little flat 4 on the side here. But this is kind of unique. This one has a high jack point, so it doesn't come with this jack, but this is, again, if you find yourself doing some off-roading, you're getting to some areas that, these trucks are got some ground clearance, so to speak, and sometimes that little bottle jack that comes with the truck, depending on what rock you're on, it's a little hard to lift it high enough to change the wheel. So they have a lift point there, and you can actually put one of those big old-fashioned, they've been around since I was a kid, and then they sort of went away, but that you can actually lift the truck from there, crank it back up to change a tire. That's what that's for. So some nice additions to what was already working very well in regards to Tacoma. But one thing about Toyota trucks, a crazy amount of accessories are always available or becoming available. This truck was sort of launched back in the fall. It was a little slow getting some of the accessories out, but they're coming on fast and furious now. One of the latest things is the folding hard tonneau. Now, the previous gen Tacoma, if you've got a 2016 to 2023, you say, hey, does my tonneau fit on the new truck? Well, no, it doesn't. The bed size is slightly different, But you'll notice on those old trucks, the Toyota Tacoma, which was great, by the way, I had one myself, kind of sat up nice and high, very solid. The problem with that, of course, if you had just talked about the little spoiler on the back here, if you've got that tonneau sitting there, it kind of negates what this little spoiler's doing. So the folding hard tonneau that is available for this truck is nice and flat, it goes flush, and it doesn't mess with the aerodynamics, but it does fold up against the cab, which is nice. So aside from tonneaus, we got, like I mentioned, there's a bed mat coming. There's running boards, Predator bars. I even saw a light up Toyota symbol for the front. That's the latest that came out yesterday. So that's a nice thing about trucks. You can personalize it however you want. Sky's the limit, and Toyota offers a lot of that. One thing to keep in mind, whatever you put on Toyota-wise, as far as accessories go, you get a 3-year warranty on that as well. Whereas if you're buying the aftermarket stuff, and there's lots in the aftermarket, believe me, whatever warranty comes with it. But Toyota will stand behind any accessory that gets added at the point of purchase, and as long as it's written on the bill of sale, you have a 3-year 60 warranty on those parts. So one little change, again, if you're familiar with Tacoma, the exhaust system, hey, it's hanging out the other side now, so what's up with that? And again, referring back to the Tundra, it's for a similar reason. So typically when you're driving your truck, in all likelihood, it's going to be one person in the vehicle most of the time. So in order to balance things out, the fuel tank now sits on the passenger side of the truck. So if you got a 200-pound driver and a couple 100 pounds of fuel, the vehicle's very balanced. But that meant that the exhaust system, which used to be on the passenger side, is now on the driver's side. So a little change up there, because it does look a little different than what we've traditionally had, but that's the reason for it. Just to balance out the truck, make it more efficient again. So now we're sitting inside the Tacoma, and there's a lot of versions of this. And the styling is going to be kind of similar throughout. This particular one has a little smaller screen. You get into the higher packages and this whole thing will be screen here. You remember earlier I talked about that JBL speaker. Well, that's where it lives, right there. Kind of a neat thing. The sound quality is actually very good. And you can buy these as an accessory as well. So if you want 2 of them, for instance, and sort of marry them together. But it lives right in the middle, and when it's plugged into the dash, it acts as a center speaker for the sound system. So they've sort of gone with a very rugged theme. This particular truck, again, manual transmission, is a sport model. So we have sport, we have off-road, and then in another video we'll talk about the limited model, which is coming, which will be a hybrid only. But you can tell by, grab handles and things, this truck is designed to go places, and so there's lots of little things you can hook on bags. Your passenger has something to hold on to, and there's names for those handles. The one thing that I particularly like, as a guy who tows trailers, it has a built-in brake controller. Again, following what we've done with Tundra. So, which is a truly a wonderful thing to have a built-in brake controller. You don't have to have to wire it all in there. So it's there. It will know your trailer once you plug it in. Say, hey, it senses a trailer, and we can get into that in a later video about all the nuances of that. But that's a nice add-on for sure. This particular truck has the auto climate control system. Please refer to a previous video of mine of how that works. But now your parking brake, we don't have a pull lever, we don't have a foot anymore, it's electronic in the truck. So you have a pull on, pull off, and normally with an automatic transmission, you just put it in gear, the brake goes off, away you go. This being a manual, you might have to pull on that or push on that from time to time because it doesn't know when you're in drive. So as far as sound deadening, so yeah, we got a smaller 4-cylinder engine, one turbo, makes lots of power. If you get the automatic transmission version, there's actually a technology that's built into it that sort of cancels out the frequency of the noise, and it's located in the back there, and it adds a sort of noise that cancels out the engine noise. Not that it's that loud, but it just gives it an extra level of quietness. And that's in most of the models except for this guy being a manual, because again, those who drive a manual, they want to hear the engine, they want to see the revs, they want all that stuff. So this particular one does not have that. But lots of great features. We're finally up to Safety Sense 3.0 in the Tacoma. This is one of our last standouts that didn't have that. And what that means, that's again another video all on its own, but we have your laser cruise control or radar cruise control, and it's picking up pedestrians, it's picking up roadsides, it's centering you in the lane. It's doing all these things a lot more efficiently than it ever did. And they sort of held off on the previous gen Tacoma because they knew this truck was coming around. So that was stuck at, I think, about 2.0. So now this is the latest and greatest safety sense that we currently have with the Toyota lineup. So moving around to the driver's side now, gauge cluster. It's all one big screen. Really cool how all that works now. We used to have, mechanical gauges and whatnot, but lots of information in there. Sort of doubles up a little bit what you get in that center screen. But this is kind of neat. So one thing about Tacoma, the off-road world, overlanding, for instance, in the last number of years has become very popular. So the truck of choice is Tacoma for these folks that want to go off the beaten path. And they start customizing their trucks. They're adding, rooftop tents, crazy racks, all kinds of building in compressors and putting in a refrigerator, all these. So all that stuff needs power. So maybe not this particular version of the Tacoma so much. There's one called a Trail Hunter, which again is a hybrid coming out a little bit later on this year. That one it kind of gives you a nice building block to start adding overlanding stuff to it. But its whole focus is overlanding. But the nice thing, the other Tacomas have these extra little buttons here. So if you can kind of come around the side, we have auxiliary. So what's all that about? Well, this is for plugging in aftermarket items. So if you got something in the bed that's going to run a light bar or a refrigerator compressor, you have different areas, and where they are exactly, they're kind of pre-wired. I got to look into, to be honest. But the point is that they've made accessorizing this truck very user-friendly. Lots of little storage compartments, like in the door here. Taller guys like myself kind of banged my knee on that the first time, just to be honest. I raised the seat up a little bit, and then that kind of fixed that problem. But designed to put all your water bottles and all these little items that we had before. They're just kind of taking things to the next level. The plastics that we're using now, we got very grippy rubber. Toyota has always been very environmental, so everything is very easily recycled at the end of the life of the truck. But now we got a little nicer feel again, right? Again, sitting in this version versus the previous gen, a lot more going on, a lot more interesting. There are some versions with a blue stripe goes across the entire dash. Love it or hate it. Some of them you'll see this is all painted white. So there's lots of different versions for everybody. And some people, it's a love it or hate it sort of thing. So they've added more lighting. And again, this harkens back to Tundra. So we got lights on the bed, in the bed, lights shining on the back of the cab into the bed. There's lights, like your backup lights, are of course on the back of the truck, but there's LEDs that when you're hooking up a trailer, that whole hitch area is now lit up very nicely. Nice little add-ons that when you find yourself in a predicament like that, these are all very handy to have. So some nice add-ons there for sure. So just to touch on the seating for Tacoma, and the reason I bring that up is in the past, Tacoma, in order to give it a lot of ground clearance, the cab of the truck sort of got a little squatty. So as a result, you feel like you're kind of sitting on the floor with your legs straight out in front of you, which I always found was okay. We didn't have a power seat in this truck for many, many years. I think that started back in 2018, 19, if I recall. We finally got a power seat, and that allowed the seat to actually go up and down. So that was huge, but then you're still limited with headroom. So now this particular truck, fast forward to 2024, they've really worked on that. So I'm 6'2". I got lots of room. I mean, this seat goes down too, and it goes up, but it's sitting more like a traditional SUV, a car, if you will. My legs aren't straight out in front of me anymore. It's actually a very comfortable drive, and the seats go back a little further than they used to. This being a manual transmission, I got to make sure I can push that clutch all the way to the floor. So the downside of that is the back seats maybe look a little tighter, and you may say, hey, there's less room in the back seat than there was on my 2016 that I've owned for so many years. The reality is, because these front seats go back a little further, the cab is actually slightly bigger than the old truck, but it looks smaller in the back. The way I look at it, you know, if you got a couple and they got a couple little kids, works great. If you're gonna haul around 4 adults all the time in these trucks that are my size, probably not the wisest thing to do, just because there's not a ton of leg room back there. But for the driver, passenger, if in a pinch, I mean, it's not like it's an access cab where it's tiny. I mean, don't get me wrong, I know at 6'2", I'm not the norm, and there's plenty of guys taller than me. But from a driver's point of view, very comfortable seating position. Downside is the back seat might look a little cramped for you, so just kind of keep that in mind while you're shopping around. So that's sort of my high-level view of the 2024 Tacoma. I hope you enjoyed that. There'll be more videos to come. Like I said, there's a hybrid version that will be arriving at dealerships very shortly. Be in very short supply, mind you, keep that in mind. And then we'll get into more of the engineering and stuff that goes along with that, because there's a nice story to tell. But otherwise, I certainly hope you enjoyed the case that comes with this JBL speaker. Have a great day.